This is Women and Reconstruction, an overview, how women are reconstructing their lives from 1865 to 1900. Let's first look at some of the legal and educational changes that are going on for women in this time period. As we know, teaching and education had been something women were gaining entry into for some time after the American Revolution. That really starts to expand in the later half of the 19th century, when many more women's colleges are opening. Colleges like Troy Seminary, Mount Holyoke Seminary, Wellesley. These women's universities and seminaries provided tools not only for women to get the education they would supposedly need to be good mothers and be good teachers, but also women are internalizing these educational discoveries and tools to debate and analyze their place in society. This is going to fuel the women's movement and the women's reform movement that we see really take off toward the end of this century. We also have new opportunities out west with westward expansion after the Civil War begins with the Homestead Act. This allowed for women to actually own land in the West. New opportunities for women out west, more so than what we see in the East. But also in the East, married women's property laws are changing. We see the femme sole, the laws of coverture, really starting to fade after the Civil War. And there are greater states that are offering legal protections for women to keep land in their name. So some segue there. We also see after the Civil War the ratification of the Comstock Law in 1873. This made it illegal to distribute materials pertaining to contraception, family planning, anything that could get in the way of what was still seen from the government's perspective as women's biological and civic duty, i.e., motherhood. The women's suffrage movement by the end of the Civil War is in an interesting place. We see the creation of the American Equal Rights Association that formed in order to really try to get women included in this reconstruction of what the nation would look like now that slavery was abolished. Women were hoping to be counted as citizens under the 14th Amendment, as it did. Anyone that was naturalized or born on U.S. soil was counted to be a citizen, right? That is what gave the newly freed African Americans their citizenship rights. And women were hoping that because they were now counted as citizens, that would give them suffrage, that would give them the vote as well. But the 14th Amendment didn't explicitly say that. The 15th Amendment would be the constitutional amendment that decided who would be eligible to vote. And this is where we start to see the movement split into two. And it's over the 15th Amendment, which gave African American men the right to vote. Now, Elizabeth Cady Stanton and Susan B. Anthony, who are pictured here in the slide, did not want to get left out of this moment in history where the nation was being revitalized, radicalized, and they did not support the 15th Amendment as it stood, which did not include women. I think it's Elizabeth Cady Stanton or Susan B. Anthony who says that something about, African American women are not being included in this as well, in response to the infamous quote that this was the quote unquote Negro's hour, right? That women should put aside their quest for the vote to honor the African Americans that are getting the right to vote. But again, that was just men. So the National Women's Suffrage Association evolved to work at a national level. It was headed by Stanton and Anthony, and they did not support the 15th Amendment, again, because it did not include women. The other association that came to be was the American Suffrage Association, started by Lucy Stone and her husband, Henry Blackwell. They did support the 15th Amendment as it stood. They agreed to the terms that, yes, let's get African American men the right to vote, and later we can focus on getting women. Some historians have said that the American Women's Suffrage Association tended to appeal more to the Victorian ideal of womanhood, right? To be a little bit more passive, to be a little bit more maybe subordinate. And maybe we see that in their decision to support this 15th Amendment. But there's definitely some debate about that. We do see by 1890, at the very end of the century, the National Women's Suffrage Association come to be, which brings back these two sort of opposing suffrage associations. So the national and the American come back as one by the end of the 19th century. Here we have an image of women voting in Wyoming. While there is a push for a national constitutional amendment to give women the right to vote, we do see suffragists working at a state level. And the first state to enfranchise women was Wyoming. And a lot of states out west actually were more open to giving women suffrage than we see out east.